Hi friends, it's your pal Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about Stranger Things Season 3, Episode 3, The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. All right, so that missing lifeguard is Heather. I have a mnemonic. I want to do Lab, Flake, Girls, Castle Wine. All right, let's go. Okay, so the lab. So first of all, Joyce goes to Hopper and is like, hey, jump on your adventure car, jump on the adventure train. We're going to solve a Hawkins, supernatural adventure. And Jim's like, hey, I don't want to. You know why? Because you stood me up for Enzo's, right? And she's like, hey, I ain't got time, and he's like, hey, you really hurt me. And this was upsetting, and what you did was not cool, right? And I really felt for Hopper in this. I do, and I think, Joyce, she wants to be friends with Jim Hopper, but I think it's very clear that that Jim is genuinely romantically interested in her, and she's not interested in him. And I thought this was, this was not good, right? This was not a good situation on Joyce's part, because from Jim's perspective, it just seems like she's using him, right? So this was tough to watch, but Jim does love her, and he jumps on the adventure train, and he's like, all right, let's go to the lab. So they go to the Hawkins lab, which is now completely shut down. But because the Russians are in the area, the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator stand-in, who literally was created by constructed by the Duffer Brothers, in my humble opinion, to look like, leather-clad Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Terminator from the 80s. It's giving 80s vibes, and that's what this show does, right? But he actually comes and fights Jim Hopper there. And the reason why is while the lab is actually shut down, and Jim Hopper's like, hey, the lab is shut down. They're not still doing all, they don't still have that hellmouth here. The gate's been closed, and they're not doing functioning stuff in the lab anymore, right? And so he shows this to Joyce, and Joyce is like, she doesn't really believe it. And to her point, there were cameras there, and that's how the Russian agent, this strongman, this Russian strongman, comes and attacks Hopper, right? But also now at this point, Hopper's understanding, like, oh my gosh, the mayor is mixed up in something. The idea that Starcourt Mall could be the site of something dangerous is starting to get credence in Jim's mind. Okay. All right. Next, we move to Mike Wheeler and Lucas Sinclair and Will Byers. Now, where the heck is Dustin? Where's the Core 4? Well, Dustin is solving coded messages with Steve. Another reason why Dustin is not hanging out with his regular friends is they don't believe him about his girlfriend, and they were not super supportive. Actually, they did come and they greeted him when he got home, and they were there for him, but they really didn't, they're not down to that. They didn't really support him in putting up his radio tower, and they are definitely not supporting him in reaching his Utah girlfriend Susie, right? And they've been very dismissive, and they're not really on board with his project. So he's dealing with the friend who is resonating with him, which is Steve Harrington. So basically, and then at that point, we get to the point where, so we're with Lucas and Will and Mike Wheeler. And Lucas gets up in the morning, and actually Will gets up in the morning, and he has the Dungeons and Dragons game all set, right? And him and Lucas and Mike all stayed over in the basement at Mike Wheeler's house. I also want to say, this show rides roughshod over Mike Wheeler's dad, right? But Mike Wheeler's dad works hard and has created a world in which two extra friends could just stay over, and they have every resource they need. They have places for them to sleep. They can have their own space. They can get whatever they want from the fridge. They can order pizza. It's a thing, right? And so I just kind of wanted to defend. I like Mike Wheeler's dad, and I think this show is incredibly disrespectful. They're like, oh, all you do is buy a house for your family and feed them, and then that's it. Like, why aren't you a good dad and a good husband? I don't like that narrative. It's definitely something I really don't like in this show, and I think he deserves more respect than he gets. All right. So at this point, they Will, wakes up Lucas and Mike, and he's worked really hard and he's created a really nice space for them to play Dungeons and Dragons, and neither one of them are having it, and they're not paying attention. They're not engaged, and it's pretty sucky because Will was engaged and he was a good player for Mike Wheeler, but when it's Mike Wheeler's turn to be in the player seat and to give Will a chance to up his dungeon mastering game, neither him or Lucas are patient, and they're not engaged, and they're not being a good friend, right? And this gets Will so upset that he runs out of the house, and then him and Mike Wheeler have a very interesting scene. And Mike Wheeler's like, "Hey man, we can't just sit around playing Dungeons and Dragons, forever. Life is changing, and it's not my fault that you don't like girls," right? And so, Lucas and Mike now are investing themselves emotionally and intellectually with these new girlfriends, right? And they're giving time to these new girlfriends. And so so Mike calls out Will and is like, "You don't like girls." Now, this has been widely discussed in the Stranger Things community, and there's a kind of a big question, right? So is he saying this because Will is LGBTQ and it's the 80s and Mike Wheeler doesn't even understand what that means or how to react or how to support him, because in the 80s we really didn't know those things, certainly not the way we do today, right? Or is this, and this absolutely did happen, a lot of people have a lot of terrible thoughts about D&D, and they're like, "Oh, well, you are, if you like D&D, you're weird," right? And so they just lumped that in the way they dealt with LGBTQ in the 80s, right? And it was terrible. Like there was this idea that LGBTQ was outside the mainstream. It wasn't, it was alternative. Now LGBTQ is completely mainstream, and they've been like, they're accepted as quite normal, right? Like they're, LGBTQ is I think we've pretty much reached a point where it's LGBTQH, right? Like, LGBTQ hetero. It's everybody, everybody's somewhere, and we've reached a point where we're like, well, that's not the most important thing about anybody, right? Like nobody needs to define themselves by this one choice, right? And so we've moved past this. And so I'll give my thoughts. So I was I was like, wait, where are they going with this? And there have been people who are thinking, okay, well, this is the Duffer Brothers trying to, be supportive to the LGBTQ community. And so what do I think? I think that Will is not LGBTQ. The reason I believe that is that's Robin's storyline. And I think it would just be poor narrative to steal that thunder from Robin's character, right? Because and in season 4, Robin gets a big reveal, and and the Duffer Brother, every single thing that they would, every like supportive LGBTQ thing that the Duffer Brothers would do has been done with Robin. So it would seem like, oh, so I think he's not LGBTQ. He is simply not concerned with girls, or he's not concerned with having any type of a romantic partner, no matter what their gender. That's not something he's concerned about now, right? He's just like, I don't. He's moved past that. It's not something he needs. He's concerned with at this time. So I don't think that's going to come out in season 3, because I think it would steal the thunder of Robin's character and retread, like kind of fly the same banner they already flew extremely well, right? Like, and so narratively, I just think they're going to keep it tight and not make that part of Will's story. So I think that's where that's coming from, and that's my take. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. I'd love to hear your humble opinion on any and all of this. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.